All right, welcome back, everyone. Another cool topic here. This story of what is called the donation of Constantine. And this is really, I sometimes describe one of the greatest forgeries in all of human history. Normally when you think of forgeries, you think of artwork or something of that nature, but this is a forgery of a historical document that really had a pretty big impact on Western civilization history. And it took a long time before anyone figured out it was a forgery, which I'll explain kind of at the end of this short lecture here. So let's get to it by looking at our little map and some terms that'll help you understand this really amazing little story. So I'm showing you a map of what we call the Frankish Kingdom. And the Frankish Kingdom, what you see in blue here on this map, where it says the Frankish Kingdom, all has to do with a very powerful Germanic tribe that takes over the northern part of what's called area of Gaul. This is all after the collapse of the Roman Empire. To understand this donation of Constantine, we have to go back a little bit. So let me walk you through it. And I'm going to start around the year 320. Because around that time period, there's a great Roman emperor named Constantine. Some of you may have heard of Constantine before. He was the one who converted to Christianity, had a big impact in changing Rome from a pagan world to a Christian world, although that's a much more nuanced discussion with a lot more detail to it. But basically, the story is that when he was emperor, at some point, he put a document down called the Donation of Constantine. And in this donation, he granted what is called temporal power to the church. Temporal power, basically kind of influence. He's telling the church officials, you have influence over worldly matters in the Roman world. And, the secular world, that your influence goes beyond the church. You have influence throughout Western Rome. And the reason he did this is because, according to the document, he was cured from leprosy and he was very grateful to the church. Some people, again, have wondered what all this means. What kind of leprosy did he have? Did he have literally leprosy? Was his leprosy his conversion from paganism to Christianity? But that's, again, another long story. So, what ends up happening is the first time this document actually seems to appear is during this Frankish kingdom, around the year 760 AD. So around the year 760 AD, during the time of the Frankish kingdom, when there were powerful rulers like Pippin the Short and Charles the Great, and I have long lectures explaining all of those in my, History 110 class, my playlist for that. There was a pope at the time, a man named Stephen II, Pope Stephen II, and it is believed around that time somebody from connected to the Pope, and again, a lot of this is not known exactly when this happened, who was the first person that when it appeared. Some people think it was Pope Stephen III. So you'll read somewhat different interpretations of this, but that it was around that time that the church comes out with this document, shows it to the Frankish leadership, whether it was Pippin or Charlemagne, and says, look, here's this document, and according to Constantine, 320s, AD, he granted the church influence. So you, the Frankish leaders, we were the very powerful monarchs of the time of all the Germanic tribes. They were probably the strongest tribes, stronger than the Visigoth or the Lombards or these other tribes. You have to grant us temporal authority. And the leaders of the Frankish kingdom looked at the document and they go basically, okay, and they allowed the church to have more influence over political matters. And if you study the Middle Ages, the Middle Ages between about the year 476 and 1400, the church was very powerful. Sometimes we call this whole period the Age of Faith, where the church had a lot of influence. And so from time to time, this document was used to give the church power. Now, as it turns out, and this is the big kicker of the whole story, there was never a donation of Constantine. This document never existed. Constantine did not write this document in the year 320 AD. Someone in the church around the 750 period created a fraudulent document to make it look like around the time of Constantine, this donation was made. When was this kind of all unfolded and really discovered? Well, it was discovered before 1440, actually. There were other people who kind of made notations of it as well. But the key person is a man named Lorenzo Valla. And Lorenzo Valla was the one who kind of looked at the language, looked at the writing, and he said, wait a second, when you look at the Donation of Constantine carefully, there are words and language in it, which is the language of the 700s, not the language of the 300s. And, if you think about it, like if you read Shakespeare today, right? Shakespeare is modern English, but Shakespeare doesn't look like our written language today. So imagine somebody today trying to create a fraudulent Shakespeare play and every once in a while putting a word that you wouldn't use in, around the time period of 1600, late 1500s, early 1600s, but a word you would use today. If it was subtle, people may not pick it up. And it took until Lorenzo Valla to really pick it up. So it turned out this whole document was one big fraud, but it was a document that still was used in various times in the Middle Ages in Western civilization. So crazy little story. If you want to know a lot more about the Frankish kingdom and all of this, definitely you could look at some of my longer lectures on these topics, but at least something to give you thinking about some of the crazy stories that we have out of the Middle Ages. All right, thank you. Hope you enjoyed that. Bye.